All right. So welcome, everybody. We know that Beth is traveling. She let us know, but I have some messages from her, which I'll get to. And Lenny also let us know that she isn't able to come. So Robin, we don't know. She may come. We've got a bunch of updates to go through, which I'll go through. And then we have Nancy, Kate, and Alyssa and guest will talk about the Rainbow Project and ideas that have emerged from that. And then we have a few other things that we have to pick up from before, especially our financial guidelines, because there are a couple other financial things that have come up that I think are going to be important, where we are clear about what policies we have and what other policies we need. So let's start with the minutes of October 23rd. A motion to approve.
So moved.
Ellen,
Second.
second by Jen. Any corrections to those additions? Okay, some updates. It's hard to believe, but the Mortal Cod event happened between our last meeting and this one, and it was really a great success. So Ernie and Ellen, I mean, the planning was terrific for that.
I'm not sure I did much of the planning, but Ernie did a great job.
And it was great that most everybody was able to attend and great turnout.
Yeah, the weather really
The weather
helped
was
us out a
gorgeous.
lot. I mean, it was beautiful.
But I have to say, my spouse said to me, you know, every time I drive by that piece, it makes me smile. And I thought,
Yeah.
That's good. One thing that I walked back to my car with Peter Rice from DPW from it, and I think they're very pleased about what happened. And he mentioned that we probably could fit 5 cars across the street. If you think about crossing the street at the light and there's a little transformer, I don't know if you've ever noted the transformer box. The city owns the land beside that.
Mm.
And the city owns the land across the way from that. And that we probably could have 5 cars there, which I think would be great, along with signage for people who want to visit the park in general, because I do think, unless you know, it's a little intimidating maybe to go all the way into the Albacore to park. And
If you even know that there's parking.
if
at
you
the
even
Albacore.
know, yes.
Right.
And I'm sorry that I didn't think of it in time to put it in the CIP, but Kate, I'm wondering if that's something that there will be an opportunity as a counselor to put. It may not even be considered enough of a cost to warrant. But if you think it would be helpful that we write a letter from Park to the council asking for consideration, or that if there's another paving project, that it be added to another paving project along with some signage, because DPW can create the signage, you know. But I think that would enhance that area, now that a lot of people are interested in it and children seem to be attracted to it as well.
I have a meeting tomorrow morning with the city manager and I'll ask that question.
Okay, about how we might proceed with that.
Yes, because it might be something that can just be included in the citywide paving.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping that we might be able to do.
Can I also mention that there is parking all the way at the end of the park?
Right.
But most people don't know that it's there. So I don't know if there's a way to put some signage in, because even though there's only 3 or 4 spots there, it's better at this point than nothing.
Exactly. And maybe that could be striped or something like that. So to indicate that you can park there.
And we probably need a sign,
sign as
you
well.
know, parking this way or something.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
Is that on the street as you're
Yeah.
turning?
it's essentially on the street.
We went there.
Where we park, like on the street,
Yes,
right?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I bet just
Some striping.
yeah, it would be great.
but people don't know to look
Yeah.
for it. And I mean, the nice thing about it is you don't have to cross the street. It's right on the same side of the
Yes.
street.
Um,
So
DPW and planning will know when that project, there's a project that's approved that's going in there that might disrupt parking for a while.
For a
there.
while, yeah.
So they'll have a better idea of when that could be striped and reasonably
Yeah.
without having to take it
Without
back.
much cost either.
Mhm.
Okay, good. So one of the announcements, of
Can I just
course,
say one more thing about
Yeah.
the Bohangle Gateway Park? The third piece that the city had put in there originally doesn't have any signage on it, does it?
it doesn't, and I don't know that it's it's the
It's the one that
temporary
was
art
in the
piece.
Vaughn Mall.
It's called
See, I think.
it's a takeoff on the Memorial Bridge. It's a small piece.
It's kind of like, oxidized or rusted.
It is.
Kind of looks like Terrence's hammers. It's like rusted and his name, I think, is cut
No,
out.
no, this is a different one.
Oh.
Yeah.
This was in Vaughn Mall and it was part of maybe 15 years ago, a temporary art installation, and it was just given.
Oh, another piece. Oh, I thought you meant assigned to the
No, no.
park. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I just, because there's that other piece is there and it just.
So
I
it
don't
should have
think-
some.
Last I looked, there was no signage and, it
Even
might
a
be good
simple-
to explain. And also, I think it does, and I'm gonna do a little research because I signed up to
Signed up
do
for
that
that.
for the,
It's on the public art Instagram page. There's a photo of it with information.
You're right.
okay,
Of who
yeah.
the artist is and what
Okay,
it's called
great.
and what's
I
missing.
saw something, I think I saw something on Facebook too, maybe even the
Yeah, could have
same.
been that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay,
Yeah, Facebook
great.
All
is
right,
doing
and we can have maybe a little plaque made similar to the cod plaque, just so, yeah, that one's clear. Okay, so the big announcement that Valerie made there was the Education and Public Art Trust with the proceeds from the 400th, which will have $100,000 in it. I read the terms of the trust, and it's for education of youth in the Portsmouth community about their heritage, especially in creation of public art. Kind of ambiguous. And I see, Sean, that you are the convener named in it.
Thank you for letting me know that.
And there's a trust committee of 6, of which Park has 1 seat. There's a trust committee to make application, and then, of course, the trustees of trust funds, this is held within that body. So I don't know if, Sean, do you know if there are any plans to develop criteria
I
for
don't know,
selection?
I don't know anything
Okay.
about that.
I would suggest that we make those recommendations before somebody else thinks of it.
I think it would be good to do that. And so if, with Nancy's suggestion, I think we can contact Suzanne Woodland, who put the trust together, and see if in fact they would entertain that. Because the way I understand from just reading the document, it would work is that we would make application for money from that trust. And that committee to be named would approve or not. So, that money could be thought about in conjunction with the Rainbow Project we're about to talk about, or it could be thought about in conjunction with any of our other public art projects that we want to think about of making application for use of that money.
I'm just curious, is it going to be like, are they trying to make it, I guess, an endowment and just give a certain percentage a year or?
I think they would probably like it to be like that, but the trust document does not limit that because it allows you to take both annual proceeds and principal. So not a classic endowment, or not classified as an endowment. But it's something for us to keep in mind. And I wonder if, are there people interested, Ernie, I would say, where you've been part of the 400 to help develop criteria, other people who might be, if we get the go ahead on this?
Okay.
Happy-
She's looked at me twice.
Okay.
I can read body.
So we'll
language.
check in with Suzanne about where this is going and then we can do that.
So do you want us to wait till we hear back from
Yeah,
you?
let's do
Okay.
that. We can tell you that the Dabari sculpture work has started. They've engaged a local engineering firm
Yes.
to do soil testing. And interestingly, and I say this for our future thinking, the cost of doing that is not that expensive. It's about $3,500. So Sean and I talked about if we are commissioning other art that requires placement directly on the ground, that we should use some of our funds to do that in advance of the RFP, so that we don't get into any questions about, will this hold this? And the person they engaged raised that what they'll be looking for is a frost line and what frost heaving might occur, et cetera. So something for us to think about as well.
It's a great idea.
You know, who's doing that work?
John Turner.
Oh,
They,
okay.
they suggested John Turner.
Mhm.
The NEA webinar, Nancy, did you get to?
I did not see this agenda until I got here
Okay.
tonight, so I'm not prepared. I took a whole bunch of screenshots. I don't know if you want to, I'll tell you my, okay. So
Want to
it
give a
was-
quick one and then
yeah,
we can
it
do
was
it?
the NEA, and I honestly, I don't remember the other two. I can write something up and send it to the group with my minutes, but it was two other agencies, essentially each taking a third of an hour-long presentation to tell commissions like this and other public art group entities across the country how to utilize their services. And it seemed like it was for communities that don't have a robust set of knowledge and experience already. So it was kind of like, if this is how we can help you get things off the ground. Did you kind of get that same sense?
Okay.
And also for communities where more like opportunity zones, like more communities where public art would vitalize the community or revitalize the community. So it wasn't necessarily like speaking directly to us, but it was definitely, I think, a valuable service that these three different organizations were letting people know they offer and provide.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do something more specific when I hand out the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I listened too, and I would agree that it seemed that they were looking for communities that didn't have the advantages that Portsmouth
Yeah.
have.
Yes.
And also because they did a few examples, they talked about some projects. And also it just struck me that probably they have a ton of applications for since it's national for their projects, but
But good to know.
Mhm.
Parks role with public art aspects of the burying ground. I did go to the burying ground committee earlier this week, and it does seem that they are good with us assuming those public art aspects. They are repurposing the committee to a new mission that will work on sacred sites. So honoring final resting places of Indigenous and Black people, free, enslaved, and freed. And that their mission will take on stewardship, community engagement, and educational initiatives, but not the physical aspects of the art. Although they are, they started with the repairs that need to be done. And they were able to get an estimate, $5,500 to redo the Sankofa. A local firm working with Jerome Meadows. And it seems like the failure is related to the type of grout that was used, because the tiles themselves are fine. They're glass tiles, and it's just the grout that held them that was a different, and so they're going to use an epoxy and try that.
Are the tiles loose, like coming out?
Coming
Yes.
out.
They
Yes.
came out.
It came out,
came
They
out.
came out.
There are little
many of them.
collections of them.
Yes.
They came out.
People,
There's,
people pick them.
Have someone
people-
preserved them? I mean, do you think most of them are?
a number of them have been preserved, but probably for uniformity, they'll want to order new, they're yellow and orange, in tone in glass. They're just small, like 1 by 1. The ground of the Sankofa is larger tiles, and that they've been fine. None of them have cracked or anything. It's really just those small tiles that form the design. But good to know that it's a reasonable estimate. The Burying Ground Trust has that money. And Corin, who sat in with us, is a part of that committee, and he'll be overseeing that work. So he's really gaining experience with public art,
Mhm.
and really, will be a great representative for us for many projects. The Newbury Way memo that everybody contributed to, which was very helpful. We did share that with HDC and with Terrence and with the developer. They decided and the architect confirmed this. They decided to go first for the building approval, which they did and they received. And they will come back for the public art. I think they didn't want to have to explain the public art along with the other issues in the building. But I think we made some good suggestions, particularly for the small alley. I think our suggestions could improve that a lot. So they have that, and they'll be going back at some point for that. And an update from Beth on the inventory. All the pieces were signed up for. She's been receiving things from people, which is great. And she urges us to send them in one at a time. That actually helps her pace how she puts them in. And she would love it if we could do it by December 9th. And that way she could use time by the end of the year to have pulled the full inventory together.
I want to
Oops.
say something about this.
Yes,
And that I went by the former Mr. Kim's.
I know, and it's
And They
gone.
yesterday, they painted out the dragon.
Oh.
And I was so sad because they had kept it for such a long time on the side there, and now it's gone. So
I think something else is going to go there. But it brings up a question of how we might deal with, because, these things they have a life. Many has a life of how we should deal with archived or former locations, and whether in the inventory we want to include that, but
Yeah.
then say, no longer available or died on,
covered over. Yeah, I think it would be great to preserve the history of
I think so.
some of those things. I mean, the ones that we have photographs of.
Well, the whale
anyway.
wall, for example, which so
Yes.
many people
Oh,
know.
yeah,
That kind of stuff.
exactly. So I think it's worth doing that, and I was writing this up, and I was sort of shocked to see that it wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, I do
So.
think we should include them.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
There's another piece the piece Dove that was on the side of I want to say Pleasant and State
Oh,
Street
yes.
building too, that is also gone.
Yeah, the one on Papa Whaley's too,
Yeah.
that dove.
Yeah.
AKA is disappearing very quickly. Yes, sweetheart.
Yep. A lot of new people who don't want
yeah,
that kind of stuff on their building.
well,
They just want to
no,
paint their building.
but
Yeah,
it-
they
it-
also,
Yeah.
murals, painted murals have a
they
life.
have a life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
that's
true.
why the Tyvek that the Ruth Blay is such a great way to do these things.
Yeah.
Because, that preserves them, but possibly if they're included in an inventory, we let owners know that, people will take more concern and care about some things as well. Okay. Here's an interesting one. In the spirit of things happen every day.
It's not happening.
It's not gonna happen, but Sean and I last week got an email from PETA. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And they wanted to do what they called a temporary art installation, which was about, it's a sheep, a size of a sheep and a sheep. That would call attention to cruelty in commercial production of wool. So the sheep has lines on it that show and that talk about different aspects of cruelty in commercial production. And they wanted to have it and market in Congress for the month of December. So I think our joint first reaction was, well, it's not really an art project. It's not a temporary art installation. It's a free speech installation and a sidewalk obstruction, and therefore really would be the legal department. We're not going to pass on the aesthetics of it. It was really placement, but city council doesn't even have another meeting to approve it. Moreover, if you've looked at all the scaffolding and fencing in front of North Church because of the work that's being done in North Church, you couldn't do that anyway right now. But it raised for us this, do we need some guidelines for how we handle temporary art installations? And I think we do.
Yeah. I think that's.
In this case, I think it was clear this was not an art piece per se. It's really there as a commentary.
I was just thinking.
So more work for you guys.
More coffee.
Do you want to do that?
Oh,
You
sure.
want to take that on?
The coffee place is really nuts.
You might check and see if other communities
I
have
bet
it.
there's probably something.
Boston
Okay.
probably,
Yeah.
if you look at big
I think this
cities.
is a really important discussion around what is temporary art versus what is political statement and public speech, because we already have some challenges around the public forum areas and what are the rules around signage, what are the rules around public speaking, amplification, all of those things. And so it's really important that it's clear, that delineation.
Yeah,
is
that what
clear.
would come to us and when it would come to us. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because I assume that I don't know this, but I assume that the legal department would say that sheep could go in a public forum area if the public forum were available and it wasn't obstructing anything.
Potentially, at the moment, we have a rule that says a human being has to hold anything that
Right.
is like, so
Oh, I see.
signs have to be held. You
Okay.
can't put up
Well-
chairs or tables or anything that is
Okay.
obstructing, and a person has to physically hold it. So I always get a little bit concerned when I see there's a particular religious group that comes downtown and they have a cart that they
Yes.
have that has signs on it, and I always say to them, unless you're touching it, it is considered a sidewalk obstruction. So I just want to give you the heads up. You don't want to end up with a ticket. So, because of those rules,
Yeah.
and we've kept those rules that so people aren't posting things in public
Yeah.
places. I think that that's always a
Yeah.
concern. Because once one does, then
Yeah.
everybody does.
But it does raise the question of if an actual piece of art or temporary art has a political statement.
Which it may
involved
well
in it,
have.
Some do,
Yeah.
then how do we decide
How do we
what's
think
art or
about
not?
that?
Yeah.
Yes, and or who else do we consult with and or where is it? I mean, there are a lot of things
Right.
to
Yeah.
consider. How long,
Art is
all of these.
Mhm.
pieces.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's
good.
actually good that
You know, just that.
Sure.
And then one just more little thing, I did email Monte today to ask him to
That's actually really
put on
interesting.
our website, the press releases for the Pierce Island sculpture, the cod sculpture. And I know the Arts and Culture Committee is putting up their photos and bios. So I hope that we would be able to too, because Beth already collected all those.
Yep.
So,
Precedent is there.
yeah, precedent is there. So we've asked him to do that as well. And as we think about, we should periodically look at our site and make sure we're putting things on it that we want to
So,
get on
Chris,
it.
excuse me, is someone gonna send the bios and pictures to Monty?
He already has them
He
because
does?
we gave them previously, yeah.
Okay.
But I can
That's
ask
fine.
Beth about that, yeah. And Ernie, you may not have,
I don't think so.
I think actually you're right. Ernie and Robin, we need to include you in that. So it was headshot, JPG headshot, and 3 sentences of bio, short bio
So send that to you.
think I ever sent
to
mine.
Beth.
I ever did it.
And Beth edited all of them and made them kind of uniform.
I'll send mine. I don't think I sent mine either because I wasn't officially appointed yet.
Okay,
It's our new term.
that's right.
Yeah.
I'll give Beth a heads up.
I'll put it
Yes. Now, discussion that Nancy, Alyssa, Kate, you can introduce for us, and maybe Brad come up to the table if you want to.
Thank you.
If you could just tell everybody your name so we know who you are. Into the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brad Landon. I live at 64 Austin Street. I've been here for 4.5 years now. I am the convener for South Church Pride at South Church. And that was one of the reasons Alyssa asked me if I'd be interested on being on the focus group.
Great.
So I took notes, so I'll kind of give an overview of our meeting. I'm gonna hit the high notes, the highlights of what the group discussed. And I hope you guys chime in for what I don't remember. And then if Brad, if afterward, if you want to specifically reiterate just where you're coming from, your perspective, and also Heidi, Reverend Heidi Carrington Heath of Seacoast Outright wanted to be here, but she started to feel under the weather late afternoon. So she sent me a statement that I'm gonna read. I'll read it after you speak and then and
Okay,
that'll-
good.
that means I won't be talking forever. Okay. So we reached out to an intergenerational sample of our LGBTQ community. So we had from high school on up, we met in this room on October 22nd, and Kate and Alyssa and I let them know about the history of the fundraising project, some of the issues with a painted rainbow sidewalk in New England, and how the funding probably wouldn't be enough to keep that looking nice, and would there be other things that we might be able to do with that money. So we provided that background and discussed with them some other opportunities other than a crosswalk, and then solicited feedback. And so because this is how my brain works, I took all the notes and kind of categorized them. So initially, general just ideas that floated through the conversation in no particular order. People mentioned perhaps historical markers for the LGBTQ history in the city. There was a comment about us being the city of the open door and being an open door community, and how that relates to coming out of the closet and how we welcome people into our community. And I believe I think you mentioned that, Brad, and that kind of like really got the juices flowing. And then I just started to take notes. Open door for who Portsmouth is today, how we embrace this, combine ideas of open door and marking historical places around the city, like the Black Heritage Trail, rainbow colored bricks or pavers, colored concrete, rainbow in Vaughn Mall leading to an open door. These are just some ideas. A fountain with rainbow lights, an interactive fountain. Some people spoke about the ritual around a fountain releasing an emotion or fear into the fountain. Something like Hollywood stars with people's names, but with little bits of history. One of the notes was that we can achieve tiles or crosswalks effects with lighting. If we can't do it with paint, maybe we can do it with lighting. Lighting in general, reflecting colors. We talked about holograms, hologram of a door maybe. And then some considerations that the group, well, I'm going to stop there on ideas. Did I capture everything? I read this to
Yeah, I
the
think
group,
so.
so, okay. And then some considerations, and the feedback was that the piece should be, whatever it is, should be as visible as a crosswalk. It should be incorporated into the city itself. It should not be on the periphery. It should be incorporated into the fabric of the town. I don't know who talked about I think it was Pip Clues, the Homo Monument in Amsterdam, how when she encountered that as a teenager, the way it welcomed and made her feel welcome in the city of Amsterdam. And that monument pays tribute to the LGBTQ history in Amsterdam, which of course, when you think about World War II and all the weight behind that. Other considerations were the public outcry that resulted when we had the vandalism targeting this community. Another consideration is for it to be like the Ruth Blay mural, a focal point in an area. Some people commented on how it would be nice to have an interactive element, like how people interact with Mother Africa and the picture frame in Newcastle. And again, the conversation went back to like walking through that door, that open door. Educational opportunities took up a lot of conversation around the open door, around aspirations, living up to that intent. An educational curriculum that furthers the dialogue, so curriculum attached to this artwork. Another consideration was, are there other places to practice intersectionality around this piece with other communities like the Black Heritage Trail or other communities that might want to be considered in that open door statement? Some preference for a queer local artist was considered, but then there was also some preference for the best artist for the job. So you know how that conversation goes. Consideration about vandalism and defacement and how we can be cognizant of that when we're thinking. And then we talked about locations, and this was just a few of the ideas that bubbled up. Market Square, Vaughn Mall, that new alleyway behind Rudy's, and of course, open to any other ideas. So those were my notes, and I don't know if Alyssa and Kate, if you have any other memories from the day before we hand it over to Brad.
Yeah, just the enthusiasm and the wide range of responses we got.
Yeah,
It was really
ideas, yeah.
beyond what we'd even hoped for.
Great
So,
conversation.
yeah, it was really great. And the two high school students
Yeah.
that were part of the conversation were very much part of the conversation, not just bystanders, which was also excellent.
Yeah.
How many people were there? Just out of curiosity.
About this number.
1, 2,
but yeah,
3,
it was
4,
about-
5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Oh, great.
That's a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was, you've covered it pretty well, but I was going to say something similar to what Alyssa said in that, for me, I was really impressed that there was a variety of people, but the high school students in particular were not shy at all. I mean, they had ideas and they were forthcoming with them, which I really embrace because they really think of things slightly differently and I think they were the ones who were at first were really wanting local artists because I think they see it as an opportunity. I don't know if they're artists, they didn't say that, but that way to express that. But they also saw some of the ideas would be structural and maybe that would need somebody who has the experience to construct, like the archway over Chestnut Street there by Music Hall came up. And Alyssa made it very clear that was not an inexpensive thing. But it was an example of, you have to have somebody who can build the structure, you know. No, I thought it was a great conversation also. I really liked the open door idea because we started to pull in the Black heritage community, the immigration population, the Jewish synagogue. I mean, there were all these things you could pull into this open door concept. And yet, and you could, it was the young ones who said, we could have tiles coming out of it and they could be rainbow colored, but there could be other things that would represent those other welcoming communities in it. And I thought that spoke well to what the mayor keeps saying about but also speaks to the community as a whole in a way that I thought was positive. The one other thing, and I can't really think of an example, was just that the along State Street, they did that painting on the side of one of the buildings with a woman who was hanged because she had
That's
shot
the
out.
Ruth Blay.
Yeah, I can remember the name, Ruth Blay, that's it, right? And how that has been surprisingly, people talk about it all, and it really has been effective. And it's not gaudy, it's just there. And, you know, other things in the city like that could be interesting. And so that was about it, I think.
And the Ruth Blay, were they talking about it because it was a person that people could identify with, or the scale of it? What were some of
I
the,
think it was the story, like we
story.
don't think about what it was like for a woman to get pregnant out of wedlock. You could get hanged for it. I mean, it's like the concept of, and this was here where we tend to
Right.
think of ourselves as in this day and age is a little more liberal than other places, and yet in reality, this was right here. You know, same as slaves being sold, child slaves being held at that Studley Tavern, whatever one is on Court Street. You know, those things happening to you.
So I'm going to read, Reverend Heidi Carrington Heath was not able to be at our brainstorm, and she really wanted to be here. So I'm just going to read what she sent me today. Honorable members of the park, I am sorry not to be with you tonight in person. Thank you for including me and Seacoast outright in this conversation. As New Hampshire's oldest LGBTQ+ organization, and one headquartered here in Portsmouth, we have a vested interest in seeing this project come to life. We have long enjoyed strong support from the city, and it is deeply appreciated. I will not sugarcoat the moment we are in. Our LGBTQ+ young people, particularly our transgender youth, are in crisis. Sorry. They are facing attacks across our state and our country in unprecedented numbers. The data tells us that New Hampshire's LGBTQ+ youth people are faring poorly compared to their national counterparts. It matters more now than ever for individuals, organizations, and municipalities to see them and to vocally, visibly support them. Public art strengthens our common life together and indeed can be life-saving for this vulnerable population. On this Transgender Day of Remembrance, when we honor transgender lives lost in the last year to acts of violence, I look forward to Portsmouth continuing to lead on diversity, equity, inclusion, and support of our LGBTQ+ community. Thank you for your time. With pride, Heidi.
Nice.
The only other thing I would add, Nancy, or in group, is that the group, the focus group was aware that $10,000 isn't going to pay for these kinds of dollars, these kinds of ideas, and that really there's probably a fundraising aspect that has to go into this whole thing, which is another reason that the open door thing is a good idea because it can bring in other groups.
Yeah.
Potentially.
And I was gonna ask you about that, Brad. So the idea is that people would be willing to like join with us in doing fundraising.
Yeah,
for-
yeah.
So that's all we have. If you have any questions, thoughts, or feedback, that's all our notes are. Unless you want to add anything.
I don't know what the next step is. I was curious about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, our fearless leader will let us.
Okay.
Well, we have, I think, a couple of different directions we can go in. Because this is unlike a, percent for art commission where, we have particular guidelines that we're gonna follow. We could, so in broadly, in terms of direction, I would agree with the focus group of refine the idea and either do an open call for responding to that idea, like an open door or whatever. I mean, I think if we refine the idea, we'd probably want to go back to the focus group as people have had a chance to think about it and add to it, refine the idea and do a direct commission for the idea, more prescriptive than we've done before, but it seems like in this case that might work. We could select an artist to do it, or we could select among a small group of artists to seek. We had Seacoast artists who applied to us for different things, so we have that opportunity, or we could do an open call like we did before. I think realistically, we probably want to identify first a budget that we think we can raise and be able to give artists a sense of what that would be. So that, that's one direction I think we could go in. Or we could take the ideas that you've summarized and do a broader call to see what comes back to us. Have artists take a look at the open door idea, the tile idea, the lights idea, and see what they come back to us with. That could be another approach. Again, having kind of estimated about what we think we could spend. Those are two ideas. A third idea is that we could try to connect this to something that we already have money for, like the garage. Where we have a base of money and to make a substantial project, and we can add to it. So those are three avenues I can think of. I don't know if people can think of other.
Which garage, the Foundry garage?
No, the High Hanover, we have $68,000 for a commission for that. So, potentially we could build on that. It's one idea.
The idea came up as a location also of that alley with the Newberry, but I think Alyssa was right when she said that has to be open for garbage trucks and so forth because of the.
They've already designed that and they have
Okay.
public art in there.
Oh,
So,
okay, so that's not what you're talking about. Okay.
no, I'm talking about, well,
At the back, High Hanover is right there.
back of
Yeah.
High
That's
Hanover.
gonna be a big pedestrian area now.
Yeah,
Look,
High and Lad Street.
High and Lad,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just ask, I know we've talked about this before, but what is the restriction about location of the art tied to a project? It has to be
On the site.
on the site or?
Oh,
I'm
It
getting
does.
different,
We changed the ordinance though, so that
Yeah.
you could move it off-site
coun-
if it didn't make sense to have
I
it
have it
on
on
site.
site. Yeah,
So like you wouldn't have something probably inside the parking garage. That's very unlikely. There is space around the parking garage. I
Right.
could note there's grassy area even around the parking garage.
and there's the facades.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
As well as.
And there's also this discussion of light. You could also, if you were hanging lights or from the garage or projecting from the garage too, that would be technically on site. So there are all kinds of,
Yeah, and I mean,
options there.
the wastewater plant, we consider.
That was an
a
example.
Site,
Yeah.
a much larger area.
Yeah.
And because it's a garage, tying it to the garage might not be the most elevated place for it.
But it is very visible.
It is
It gives
visible.
you-
Very simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's very much visitors would see it and all that. It depends how you do it, of course.
Yeah.
Especially on that backside.
One other thing that came up in the discussion was Kate mentioned that Bond Mall is going to be torn up because of this water, I can't remember if it's water or sewer, but some.
yes, they have to do water sewer this spring.
Yes.
So
They're taking out the trees that go down the middle
I
of it
know.
and that,
Yeah.
and so that will be
Yeah.
redesigned.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the place for it, because that's a public walkthrough area. And that's,
Don't have a
lots of
choice.
people seem to like that idea, so.
Yeah.
the young people mentioned that a lot of them hang out on
Yes.
Bond Mall. I
Yeah.
think there's a bubble tea place
Yes.
there. And so I think that drives a
Yeah.
lot of,
Yeah,
hanging
it's
out.
always been an area for that. I think there's a lot to say for that,
Mhm.
as well.
So I didn't know with the city, this project you said is being done this coming summer.
it's starting this spring. So they'll start the sewer line this spring. So they'll have to take down the trees and do the sewer line this spring, and then they'll do a temporary pavement there. Probably for the summer, so that they're not doing construction in the middle of summer season. And then they'll probably come back the next spring to finish design. So they'll start design now.
Yeah.
That design process over the winter. So they'll have a good idea of what all is going to go there before this coming summer and be planning for it.
That's
So-
why I brought it back in again, because the timing might,
Timing might be good.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Jen.
So we talked about, and I apologize if I talked about being able to tie monies into not into a physical building, but the place. Would we have money available with the redo? No.
No, because it's not, it's water sewer. It's
So
not,
it doesn't have anything to do with.
it's not a
okay.
building, so.
It's not, on the other hand, just the physical work, let's say there were, I'm going to hesitate to say tiles, but let's say there were tiles or pavers or something like that. We might be able to get the labor done cooperatively. And that's the most expensive part of all these projects, not usually the materials,
Right.
just the installation of it. So, possibly if we had plan enough ahead, we could cooperate that way.
Did Novotel have to do art for that building?
No,
They
because it's private. It's
Yeah.
private.
They did do a piece on the side of the building, is my understanding, or they were going to. But because it's private, they don't have to.
Yeah. On the other hand, they would be a great example of a potential,
Yeah, again,
Funder.
there's somebody for fundraising to
Yeah.
approach, because
Yeah.
if it were there, it's right there where they
Yeah.
are.
I think the Von Mall is a great location for many of these ideas that have come up.
We
with.
do.
But how do people feel about these different paths of whether we sort of say, again, with the focus group, and I'll just pick the open door since that's such a theme that ran through this, the open door plus this idea of many different population groups, welcoming many different population groups, but making it clear that what those population groups are. So there's some identity here. We want to have that we would be more prescriptive and that we would do a call around something more prescriptive. What do people think about that? Maura, I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm thinking, so.
Okay. Ernie?
I'm not sure what I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, when we did Pierce Island, we gave a whole laundry list of ideas that people had, and the artists came back to us with different approaches. Here we could say, we have a set of concepts. We've narrowed the set of concepts, and we'd like something that represents an open door, something that represents different population groups in our community. And here are some ideas. And then we ask the artist to give the design rather than be quite as open as we typically might be. That's what I mean about being prescriptive, that we narrow it down before we ask someone to bid on it.
Yeah, I don't mind being prescriptive as long as we still leave latitude for interpretation in a variety of different ways, but
I agree.
think that's
I
okay.
agree because I think that as much as our ideas, like we all have a different vision of what we just talked about.
Yes.
And an artist is gonna really be able to
Take that.
bring those to life in ways that maybe we hadn't even considered. And that's what's exciting about bringing the artist in, or artists.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that we must be mindful, though, whatever we do, that what the intent of the funding was, so that we don't have any challenges with the donor.
Yeah.
Who has a specific intent. So we have to be very clear that they were looking for LGBTQ plus
That's a clear
art. Yes.
identity. Yeah.
I sent this document, the document that I just read to you, to
Great.
Kathleen. And I let her know that, the idea was turning into something that was more inclusive with a clear message attached to it. And she is so fine with it. She's like, you don't really even
Excellent.
need to.
Okay.
She trusts the committee, but that's a really good point to
It's very
make sure it's
good.
front and center.
Yes, I agree.
That experience that Pip had in
Yeah.
Amsterdam won't happen if it's too,
Mhm.
too
Yeah, diverse.
inclusive and diverse.
Yeah.
Like, we want to make sure that it's saying what it needs to say.
Yeah.
And also,
Yes.
maybe, I don't know.
It's very important. And we have pictures
Yeah.
of my family standing at that very piece of art in Amsterdam. And it was something we discovered, walking down the street, and we're like, oh, look, there's a pink triangle in the middle of, the pavement right here across from the Anne Frank house, so it was really striking.
And do we need, at some point, we'll need to talk to the folks who have stores, businesses on Von Mall too, if that's the place we decide that we're going to do something like this, just to make sure that they're incorporated.
The people
as
would
well.
be informed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, in doing the African Burying Ground, we did that with all the houses around and,
Mhm.
they were all incredibly supportive. They became real champions of it. So I do think that's important, Ellen.
I
Yes.
was just gonna share, this is more like a general comment that from doing the Endeavor RFP and sending that out, is that the artists spend so much time, and I don't know what the answer is, but on these proposals. And I know it's sometimes really frustrating because they spend so much time and then it doesn't go anywhere. And so we had kind of talked about alternatives, like maybe having it, the process be that you don't have to do so much work up front, that you more share what your experience is, and maybe, just a few of your thoughts. And then from that, you get a smaller pool to ask for proposals. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I heard that a lot. I know Terrence was pretty passionate about that.
Yeah. Well, essentially we did that with Pierce. We just asked for a sketch, a concept.
I guess I would also advocate strongly for a request for qualifications is something you're looking at all the qualifications anyway, but it doesn't take it at all as much time, even though just a sketch, people don't do just a sketch because you're interested in winning the job.
You wanna set yourself apart.
And it takes time to create the concept of sketch. It's a tremendous amount of time that communities, I don't think, have any idea what they ask people for.
But
So,
I will say,
that we could narrow down and then ask for proposals.
I will say, everyone that sent to us, we would have considered qualified. I mean, for the Jabari.
But you would have the opportunity to narrow them. We'd consider them qualified, but we would choose among them. That's the process. And
But-
that just
But we would need to,
respects their time.
we would need to have very clear ways of choosing among. We would need to have very definite criteria that would be beyond qualifications as a public artist, because we'd otherwise have 120 of them that it's hard to.
I mean, and that is a way to bake in, we prefer a queer artist or we prefer a local artist, and that's part of the criteria. And then people know why, if we want that to be part of the criteria, then that's explicit.
Right.
And not,
Right.
can't be misunderstood.
I'm just like, I wonder what the options are and if there are groups that are doing that well, have come up with a process that puts less of a burden on the artists. And, but it's still, because I agree with you too, you would have looked at, you would have said everybody's qualified. So I just think it would be interesting to see what other people are doing and if there are alternatives.
If you think about this though, because remember, I do this for a living and it's just part of the cost of doing business. But making it as easy as possible, I agree with. And when you think of almost everything that we got, and I won't say everything, almost everything we got was boilerplate. You know, these are professionals. They have their examples already. They have their Vita ready. They have their, and the only thing we asked for that was at all different was give us a sense of your concept.
Yes, and we also were drawn to the ones that had more sophisticated samples. So there is that. But also I do know that when I know it didn't come to fruition, the RFQ process for the brick market was more like what you're talking about, because I know a couple of the artists that applied for that. So it was much more about sending in the work you've already done and a high level concept for, I think it was about, I think Mark McNabb was looking to honor strong women leaders,
yeah,
women
yeah.
leaders. So the artists really were responsible for sending in showing what they are capable of and sending a more of a document and not creating something specific until round 2, until it got narrowed down. So,
But then remember, as an individual paying for it, as a private individual, he could simply select what appealed to him. We need to, as a public body, we need to spell out criteria. Yeah.
If it helps at all, the city council is at 3rd reading on December 2nd of changes to our procurement procedures to become completely electronic, so that there will be no more paper submissions.
So that'll help.
That should make
Great.
it easier for everyone. So we're almost there. So that's positive. And by the time we made this request, everything would come in electronically.
So I want to pick up on one of the other things Alyssa mentioned, and that is preferences. You know, how do we feel about preferences? And I ask that knowing that if we do this, it sets a precedent, and we need to think about how we're going to distinguish when we do preferences and when we don't.
didn't we say also that local artists didn't we mention something about local artists in the last one? We didn't say anything about it.
No, we left it open.
I think we did for Foundry. We included
Points or,
something about local or regional artists.
I mean, we can say that, you know, extra consideration would be given or something like that.
I like the idea of giving a preference to local artists. And
Or LGBT.
you know, so, or well,
Yeah.
like, I guess I was talking in general, you know, and then if, because like, as you said, with the Pierce Island, it was those, you know, really slick presentations, you know, that gives local artists that might, you know, not have the same resources a little edge up. I mean, they're not going to get the job just because they're a local artist, but it gives them a few extra points.
Well, I hesitate to say anything because of course the process was confidential, but my feeling wasn't that those pieces that were picked as finalists were finalists only because they were slick. I think it had something to do with the way that the concepts were articulated, both visually and verbally, and
Mhm.
some of the ones that didn't make it, who might have been local artists, didn't do that.
Mhm.
Is that
There's,
I think that's fair. And also, if you remember, though, there was one that was withdrawn that we all liked a great deal and was very simple sketch out. And that I think would have certainly made it to the finals just by how everyone was responding to it.
Well, I just wanted to say, when we talk about local artists, we need to be really careful about how we define that,
Yes.
because that's something we're struggling with on the Arts and Cultural Commission, because we're losing so many local Portsmouth artists to neighboring areas. We just simply can't afford to live here and operate here in studio space. So local might not be Portsmouth. Yes.
Right. It might be regional. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, which is hard to
So different
define.
people.
I'm generally, I think I am not in favor of ever restricting. I like having it as open as possible. However, in this case where I think something that could be differentiated is this, the intent of the art. This is celebrating the community, which is different than just, for instance, Pierce Island was.
Yeah, that's
just a
true.
Piece of public art, and it wasn't
Right.
attached to the history and the community in the same way. So that seems like a
That's,
different.
it's a very good point. Yeah.
And as I can't remember her name, but the Seacoast Outright person mentioned, this is a very tender time, will be a
Right.
very tender time, especially for the youth. Yeah.
And that, following up on that, I mean, that's one reason why I think, and echoing the point that Kate made, I think it's really, I mean, I'm really in favor of intersectionality and open doors, but it's a very tender time, and it would be a really good I mean, more than gesture, action
Yeah,
to take
I agree.
that really makes it clear that the city of the open doors, means really
Yeah.
open.
Yeah. I think that would be good.
You know, I mean, and I don't know how one, you know, I'm not an artist, so I wouldn't have to figure it out, but you know, how you would, you know, foreground that idea while also being
Right.
bringing
Inclusive.
those other
Yeah.
pieces into it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one of the things that came up, I think, in our discussion was Von Mall and the way it's connected. It's got the longer corridor.
true.
Yeah, in burying ground.
True.
And that if we did something on Von Mall that was particularly related to the LGBTQ community, that leaves other places along the pathway for other
Yeah.
pieces, potentially,
does.
that other, you know, that open door as a continuum.
Because it goes on and on.
It goes on and on, exactly. And it's gonna keep going.
connects.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Von Mall, people really are interested in
Yes, it's
seeing,
great.
for all these reasons, Von Mall is kind of.
Yeah, it's a great place.
But do we
it's
need,
great.
one more discussion with a few more of the, you know, it's like, here's where we've heard it. We had our first meeting. I really think we need a second meeting again to bring in, if we're talking Von Mall, with some of the Von Mall merchants, a few more people, just to solidify, because right now I'm hearing that we're really pushing this kind of one thing, and I'm not sure that we have enough input from the community at large. And I think the more we get the community at large, because we asked for a very specific group.
Yeah.
And I think the whole point of this is to make sure that everybody's inclusive. It's not like, oh, here we just push this through as this group. I think because I think we have to get more people involved. I would do
Yeah.
one more, you know, open session with the focus of this, but making sure that
Invite those.
Exactly.
Invite multiples, but I think even before that, we need to talk to Public Works so we
So,
understand.
They have to be in this.
We have to really understand
What
the
that-
parameters for what's going to happen there before we even do that. Maybe that's something we could ask for at our next meeting so that we're really clear about that. Timing, so that we know what our horizon is for when we would have to make decisions. And
where the pipe is going. 'cause you
exactly.
the Top of the pipe.
I know where that's going. That's because that's why they're removing those trees,
Yeah,
because they
but-
have to go on that side, so.
But they may give us, even if we have this idea of the door, tiles, we could throw out some of these ideas and get a sense of what, you know, what physical constraints or opportunities we have. So maybe we do that first. And then we do something like you're talking about, Jen. I think we could, out of this meeting, maybe craft a paragraph that sort of describes broad intent. That we could shop it with both the original focus group, which would be important, as
Exactly.
well as the merchants in that area. With the idea that that's also a fundraising opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Can I just ask, would this group be open to participating in that planning process if I make that request for Von Mall as kind of in
Yes,
some way or
sure.
another, so that
Sure. Now, I know, hasn't there also already been public input into what happens with Von Mall or not, Kate?
no, because
Okay.
we had a Von Mall committee for quite some time, and all of that is
yes.
sunsetted, and most of it is
It was temporary, wasn't it?
it was, and
Yeah.
it's sunsetted by many, many years. And so this is kind of a completely
Okay.
different level of planning. But at the moment, we're just trying to address the fact that the sewer line collapsed last spring.
Yeah.
Like, so,
Okay. All right, so a couple of next steps then. We learn about Von Mall first. And then we shape this concept and try it out with the group that met before, as well as merchants.
Let me ask, you know, before the other piece, we did this focus group where we did a presentation and invited
Right.
people in. Is that the kind of wider meeting that you were envisioning?
I
where-
was just,
Yeah,
but very, but I think again, we can kind of focus, here's some of here's what came out of the initial discussion. And I think because you had really 3 or 4 really key concepts there.
Yeah,
So it's like, these are the ideas that we had, you know, is there something else? Because I think you can focus that one, because we were all over the board
Right.
for Pierce Island.
Yeah.
You know, but that was the whole point of that one.
So is that what our subcommittee should follow up on in terms of planning for that meeting and creating?
I think that would be great to be thinking ahead to that. Thinking ahead to that while we get this Von Mall clarity in our minds.
This is, I mean, I think it's a really great idea, and I think we need more. I think that this is just this is a preliminary part of the discussion, but I'm worried, like, if, you know, there is a merchant or some, you know, kind of I want to use a loaded word, but I was going to say hysteria about, you know, we don't, you know, this is no, you know, we really oppose the concept of making a LGBTQ plus monument in our space. You know, where do we go from that? I mean, we don't want it. I
Well,
mean, I
it's
don't know,
not
but
their-
it's
It's
just,
public
we don't
space.
want
Not their
we
space.
don't
Not their
want-
space.
Well, but it's not their space, but if we're asking the merchants to
I think
comment, then we're saying it is their space.
but I think we're not asking for their permission.
Mm-mm.
We're asking for their thoughts about this idea in terms of what would they add to it? How might
it-
they
yeah,
see
yeah.
engaging with
And
it?
it could be out of fear, out of some of the things we've talked about, fear of defacement, unwanted attention, you know,
Yes.
if there's somebody who's.
And those are
against
all
it,
legitimate.
Those are, and
Yeah.
we should talk about that as a community, you know,
And I'd rather know now
Yeah.
than
That's right.
during installation.
right.
So.
Well, you know, I'll give you, from the African Burying Ground, people had to get in their driveways, so they're, you know, we're blocking off a street there, and so, you know, that they had to really think about what's that going to mean for, of course, you know, how, and will emergency vehicles be able to get to our house, you know, all of that sort of thing. So it's that sort of discussion of how will this work, and what do we need to think about to, you know, to make this work. Sean and I we learned about anti-graffiti. You know, we've had 2 opportunities. Anti-graffiti paint, which is expensive. but, and anti-graffiti finishes that now, you put on things that you're concerned about.
That's great.
So it sounds like we have a direction.
One last
Yeah.
thing, I wondered if we had if we need to make a decision of any sort about tying it to the garage or not, or if we can let that keep floating.
We can let that float, I think, as we pursue these avenues. I do think what we should think about is about how much money we think
Yeah.
we need to raise. Now, Public Works is, that'll be helpful. That discussion will be helpful with them to get a sense of cost, but we also need to have our eyes out for funding opportunities that might be specific for, this type of work that we're doing. So that's something that we can all be alert to. I mean, in my mind is, that we probably should be thinking in the 35,000 minimum to be able to do the kind of thing that we've been talking about. And that's not thinking about installation, that's just thinking about materials.
And who would do the fundraising? Would it be like, who would be ultimately responsible? Would it be Park or?
I think, Park would be ultimately responsible. It would be great to partner with the pride groups and think about particular sources. But yes, it would be also an opportunity for us to do some fundraising.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. But if we can, if the Von Mall is so interesting to me because it may give us the installation that is always so costly.
Smart.
Yeah.
And we may be able to work even lighting, lighting will have to go in there. Maybe the lighting can be coordinated with this. So it gives us some opportunity.
Yeah, we did, at the, event for, Cod and the Mortal Sea. I think I told you, Chris, that, Lisa Bottomley from the Fuller Foundation.
Yeah, she was.
Which we got an $8,500 grant for the endeavor. And she was there and encouraged me several times to apply for, future funding.
Excellent.
She's now heading up the Fuller Foundation.
Okay, that's great. So good. So we'll work on inviting Peter for next meeting. Good.
Just an odd question. Would some of that education and public?
Well, that's what I
trust-
was
I mean,
thinking.
that was,
Yeah.
because that would be, I mean, we're certainly educating.
Well, so people who are writing the guidelines, think about that. Because I agree with that.
I mean, that sounds like just a shoe-in right there.
Sounds like a very good possibility. Thank you, Brad. So,
You're welcome.
and feel free to share any of this with
No, I will.
We'll follow
colleagues.
up as soon as
And
we.
you'll-
Okay, great, good, because you do a great job of summarizing. Pulled it all together so beautifully. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Why my
Thank
face
you.
looks like
Thanks for
this
being here.
during every meeting. I'm like.
Okay, so speaking of money, actually, Sean, if you can bring up, this is an old business, but remember we proposed some spending policies and we were going to think about them, just make sure that we're still, yeah, we're still good with these. It's actually helpful as we're just talking about raising money right now. We talked about where our money comes from, percent for art commissions, maintenance, the CIP allocation. We got 25,000 this year. We'll have another 25,000 next year, presumably. Grants that we write or fundraising that we do, donations. And then, well, we haven't come up with it to be thinking about a dedicated funding stream.
Right.
But on the next slide are the policies that we had come up with, and just want to make sure these still work for people. That we want to reserve 7 to 10% to be placed in the trust fund when we do a commission, but that's undesignated so that it goes for what is needed. that we strive to keep a minimum balance of 25,000 in the trust fund for emergency things that might come up. Which we have right now. That, those undesignated funds are, we give priority for city-sponsored public art, things that we have commissioned or that, you know, were done before us, as opposed to like a private piece. We encourage all maintenance funds to be undesignated going forward. And this is the tricky one for number 5, for money that we get, like, you know, CIP money and others, that the priority is for projects that are under our control that require additional funds to be realized. The project we just talked about could be an example. And the second priority is leveraging funding, matching. Do those,
I'm not sure I fully understand the last one.
that,
So we are going to use donations for things under our control. What is the second priority?
what's the second priority?
Well, I guess.
So
Me.
Let's-
All
all right, so if you think of the first one as things that we have, let's say the Pierce Island sculpture we find as we come down to it, that we need another $2,000 for a plaque.
Yep.
That would be something under that we have commissioned. And the second one might be a project like one we're gonna talk, somebody comes to us and says, you know, we have this opportunity to do XYZ, but we need a match. It could be the Prescott Park could have been an example of that.
Yep. Understood and agreed.
Do these work for everybody? Consensus?
Yes,
So we
yes.
can use those for,
Do we need to
Operating.
clarify the question mark exclusive or not?
well, what do you think about that?
I'm sorry, could you ask, I missed
Number
that.
3, where it says undesignated maintenance funds, would we ever, let's say, I can't use the Martin name.
Well, I think the-
Let's say the Ruth Blay example. Let's say the Ruth Blay example gets, graffiti or slashed. And it's not one that we did, but we identify its importance. We know it's important to people. Would we offer maintenance funds for something like that? That would be an example
Yeah.
of priority rather than exclusive. Jen,
I think the exclusive needs to be gone.
okay,
Because I think that there are so many things, and the example of, you know, that lovely Chinese bracket. If we had known that, could we have spent, you know, is there something that we could have done to save that? And I think,
Good
yes,
example.
it's kind of maintenance, sort of, but it's also saving it in
Yeah.
some ways.
yeah,
So I think once we say, sorry,
okay,
that I think it's wrong, because I think we're going to change our minds.
okay, I agree with that. And the Ruth Blay I hadn't thought of, but that's an easy example. Okay.
Just for clarification on note taking, are we adopting these policies? Are we taking a vote? Are we?
And that's a choice. They can be things that we adopt or that we simply refer to at this point rather than as an official adoption. If we adopt them, I think we'd argue to put them on our website, and that might actually help people to know how we make decisions. That would require a motion.
I would move to adopt these as our official fund use
I would
policies.
second.
Any more discussion of that,
And that was Alyssa and Jen.
Jen?
Got it.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good.
Thanks for that. I just wasn't sure what I was writing.
So one more thing for Monty.
Yes.
A couple.
Anybody know his favorite
And a
cookie?
fruit basket.
In a fruit basket,
basket,
in a cookie
cookie
basket. Number 6 is just, it's really quick, but we have invited to our next meeting. Sean and I were contacted by Kristen Ringman, Flying Owl Painting, local artist, muralist. who has an idea for the wall that is across from the Foundry Garage. It's 100 feet long, concrete wall. And she will propose it to us at the next meeting. It's I think, a fairly modest cost and an interesting idea. The city owns that wall, and we have learned the city owns grass behind it. I wanted to bring it up now because I thought you could go take a look at it between now and our next meeting, just so it's in your mind of what that wall looks like, and look at the strip above it as well.
Is she the same one that's done the ones in Kittery? Because there are two that are done in Kittery.
I
Well,
don't think so.
I don't think so.
No.
Because, yeah,
No.
because I was wondering that too. Her name was something. Well, it doesn't sound like the same.
No, she hasn't. It was not on her Vita anyway.
'Cause there's the one that's right when you're going into the shipyard, you're making the right.
Yeah,
And then there's the other one at Tulsi.
no,
Oh, I'm thinking the one,
you're thinking of the one that just as you cross the bridge, and
Right, but there's a whole long wall at Tulsi now too.
I have to go look
I
at
was
that.
thinking, I was thinking the one that did the Shalimar, the wall
Oh,
near the
no.
Shalimar,
No,
and
that's-
then did in
that's a different-
Kittery.
Those are
Guys,
mandalas.
No,
Yeah,
that's
that's a different
too.
artist. Yeah.
It's very hard to see this because it's odd to get an angle on it, but she's recently done. If you go look at that wall, look up at an old decrepit
Oh, yeah.
building, brick building that she has beautified the side of. And you'll see that, and she'll show us some pictures of it as well.
And could you say again the address, where that is?
Across from the Foundry Garage, the long wall that faces the Foundry Garage.
Okay, great.
It's across from the.
That's what I thought.
Is she proposing that she would fund it?
She's proposing, I think, that she would do part of it.
Okay.
And that she would also do some grant raising for it. But that's what we need to talk with her about.
I see. Okay.
Now, I also want to tell you, Kristen is deaf. And so an interpreter will come with her. She speaks very clearly, but she has difficulty understanding. So we'll have to really talk clearly and
One at a time.
yes, one at a time. Yes, we talked to her about that. And ideally if people can be here in person, I think that'll help. But take a look at that wall just so you have it in your mind. And then just watching time. I think we can do this. Let's just run through the PowerPoint quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. And we won't have a discussion about this, but we'll set it up and you can think about it. Yeah, we've been asked to consider relocation of this piece of public art. And I wanted to just give you a little background on it so you can think about it. It's the Button Project that is, whoops.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, you're fast. I said fast.
Great.
The 9/11 Memorial Project, which is currently next door in City Hall Chambers. The artist was Sarah Haskell. Some of you know her. She's from York. And it's almost 10 feet high, 4 feet wide. And it's hand woven, that she is a weaver with of linen and rayon, and it has buttons on it. And so the history was after 9/11, she called for buttons from around the country, and almost 9,000 were donated by people. Antique buttons, all kinds of wonderful buttons. And she selected 3,116 to represent the lives that were lost. And then 25 different community volunteers came together to sew the buttons onto this, what she calls a shroud-like. And so it was dedicated to honor Mayor Sorrell, who was our mayor at the time during 9/11, and who was a very interesting and kind of warm and motherly person, I think, who gave people a lot of feeling of comfort. And it commemorated the 10th anniversary. And so it was voted by the council really on the 10th anniversary. And it's had a big exhibition history around the
Mhm.
country, including twice being at Ground Zero at the Memorial Museum. So it's got some provenance behind it as well. And so this is just me thinking, but I haven't contacted any of these folks, but options for us to consider of inviting, if it's relocated from City Hall, some thoughts about where it might go. You know, the public library, you can think of when you have some hanging spaces. The community campus, someone suggested to me might be an interesting option. Fire Station 2, obviously the firemen are very connected to 9/11, and there's a community room there. Senior Center, I'm not sure there's a great space there, but that was the thought. Middle school has great hanging spaces, as we know. The new police station. But something I thought we would discuss, and then depending on what our committee thinks, we would reach out to people in some of these different areas to see if they're interested.
Can I ask why it is being relocated?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm asking why it's being relocated.
Just to redo, I guess.
Big request, yeah, no, then at a certain point, the city council chambers will be redone, I think in the next 2 years.
Mhm.
So it's just part of that.
But it's a permanent relocation. It's not we want it back.
I think that's how it was presented to me, yes.
It also does lend itself to, you know, a hanging, I think originally the thought was the library would have been a perfect place. And at the time, Mary Ann, who's the director of the library, did not want it. And, you know, that may have changed. I think she didn't believe in textiles in the same way.
Yes.
She didn't understand that textiles are like one of the oldest forms of public art.
It's single-sided, correct?
Single-sided.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it does kind of sit in the corner there.
It
feels-
does.
It's really
yes.
not
A great space. No,
able to
It's not,
interact with it.
people don't interact with it.
No.
'cause
Oh.
it's- Yeah.
It's like,
you know.
And they don't know what it is. It
That's
just
right.
seems
Right.
this very weird black thing.
So I
Yeah.
actually have a whole book about it that Sarah did that we
Yeah.
could put with it or do a plaque or something. So finding a better space, you know.
Is that on it's not on our list, is it?
Hmm,
No.
Interesting.
Gosh, I think it is.
City
It's
council.
just very overlooked. I
It's
mean,
very
most-
overlooked. And also the fact that, you know, there hasn't, I mean, Mayor Sorrell did a lot for the city, and unlike, you know, the Eileen Foley Chambers and whatever, there hasn't been a lot done to remember Mayor Sorrell's tenure, and so to also make sure that that's a part of it. So we'll talk about that next
Chris, if
time.
you send me that, I will get it done and give it to, we will
Oh,
have it, but at least
sure.
I'll write it up.
Sure.
But just send me this one.
Yep. And then the only other thing I thought we should, all of us look at our calendars for the next 6 months so we can get these on the books. And you can email me to let me know if there are any things you know you're not going to be at, because if we know we're not going to have a quorum, we might as well pick another day. And, you know, vacations and whatever, I'm sure will come into this.
Did note that the February and April are during school vacations.
Are they?
Which doesn't affect maybe most folks, but if we have new members, it's not probably a big deal but that's just where they fall this
Yeah.
year.
But to take a look, and then at our next meeting, we'll do that. So, Kristen, at our next meeting for the Flying Owl, and then, maybe also if we can do it, Bon Mall, if we can learn about Bon Mall, that'd be great.
I just wanted to add one thing, mention one thing. If we're at the end, the flash vote, you know, Monty sends out the flash vote, and which I love. And there was a question that included public art. So I just wanted to mention that and see if people saw what community priorities were.
Yeah. And anyone could go to the website and look at those results.
Yeah, it was interesting.
This group would like to do that.
That it was encouraging. You know, that public art was on the list,
Sure.
Yeah,
and that it was it did get some attention.
Yeah, it wasn't at the, it wasn't near the top, but it got a lot of support.
Right.
And they were really important things on that
Yeah.
list, like,
Yeah.
you know, bike paths and, safety. Bike and yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
safety.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
Thanks.
I thought it was interesting. I love that. I love that.
great.
The Instagram's way fun. It's so much
Yeah.
fun to do.
And then, and when you get it back and
You're
you
like-
see- yeah, yeah.
Great. So a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Seconds.
So have a good Thanksgiving.